On behalf of council, I think all of councilors are here. Sorry, fire. Town Hall 15 years ago. So we've got Councillor Roulette, over back there, Councillor Luckmeyer, Tanner, and Lily all here. And also on behalf of senior staff, we have our acting CEO, Mr. John Marsh, our Director of Engineering, Paul Beer, our Chief, Darryl Cozy, and his second, Peter, and of course our Director of Planning and Sales, and I saw Heather Swenson, our Deputy Core Administrator here somewhere as well. And on behalf of all of us, I want to welcome all the members of our fire department. Thank you. You know what, and about half of them have either 10 or 20 years experience. We handed out a few medals last council meeting. I think there are 6 who have 20 years of experience and 5, 10 years of experience. That's about half of the department. That's a pretty solid record. And that's a big, important facet for us to rely on and continue that kind of service. And I think they've performed remarkably well over the last 65 years. Thank you. Without further ado, I'd like to also point out that this meeting is being recorded. So people who were not here tonight or people who want to refer to it later, it will be on our website. I think it's called on the public project information page of the town website, qualicum.com, and it will be posted, I believe, on our Facebook, Patricia? Yes. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our project manager, Walter Hoogland, who will introduce his members of his committee, and then we'll turn it over to the architect. Thank you.
Hi, I'm the project manager, and I'd like to just turn it right over to Luke, and he's going to pick the program over with regards to our needs and how to move, how he sees it, and how the town has seen it for a number of years.
Thank you, Walter. So first I'm going to provide you with an overview of the meeting. The first question on everyone's mind is, what's wrong with the existing hall? Why is it that we need a new hall in the first place? So I'm going to cover off that portion of the presentation tonight and look at what the issues are. Next, Bob Weir, our Director of Engineering, will be discussing the new proposed fire hall site, why it's a good location, and what the opportunities are there that we don't have at the current hall. Walter Hoogland will be discussing the overall project management, what our plan is for the process as we move forward from here, where we've come from so far, and where the project is going. Kim Johnson, our architect on the project, will be reviewing the plans that have been in the works now for quite a while. We looked at them in April, and we have more details on them now than we did at the time, so we'll be listening to Kim as she goes over the plans. And finally, John Marsh, our Deputy CIO and Financial Administrator for the town, will be going over the detailed analysis on the financial planning for this project. Walter Hoogland will also be discussing the finances at that point. All in all, this presentation will be about an hour, and there's about an hour following for questions. So if we could just ask that everyone holds their questions until the end, that way we can move through the evening sort of quickly and have a good, generous amount of time for discussion. So before I dive too much into the question of why we need this new hall, I think it would be valuable to review some of the recent history. We arbitrarily chose the starting date of 2008, but really this story begins in, say, 1990, when our Director of Engineering remembers first giving a report to council and the mayor that this fire hall was not up to code. He at the time had concerns about the stability of this fire hall. So that the story could begin there, but let's start in 2008. At that time, council and the town directed Herald Engineering to evaluate the seismic stability of the fire hall. And at that time, Herald Engineering reported that major retrofits would be required to bring the hall up to a post-disaster standard. Post-disaster standard is one that ideally is standing after an earthquake, as opposed to one that's sitting on top of the fire trucks. And the one that's standing is the one we want. 2009, we put an addition onto the fire hall because we had a longer firefighting apparatus that would no longer fit in the bays. So at this time, there were some seismic upgrades to the hall, but we all knew it was a quick fix. It was a patch that would get us by for a few years, and indeed it has. So 4 years later, we're once again ready for some changes. In 2010, Council incorporated targeted tax increases to plan for the replacement of the fire hall in their 5-year financial plan. So that's the first point at which Council starts setting aside money on an annual basis for the fire hall. 2012, in this Council's corporate strategic plan, they prioritized the replacement of the fire hall. And they directed staff to make changes and advance the fire hall project during their council term. So although the project had begun in the previous, this council prioritized it higher on the list and got it started right away. In December of 2012, Johnson Davidson Architects was engaged to do preliminary site planning. 2013, April of this year, we saw a plan that was very similar to the one we see today, although with a lot less detail. So for those of you who were at that event, I think probably some of the things that I'm saying now sound a bit like a repeat because we've heard them before. We knew what the problems were with the hall, so we're just going over it again. And July of this year, Johnson Davidson Architects was awarded the contract for the continuation of this work. And also on July 8th, Council formed this fire hall working group, which Walter Hoogland will discuss a little bit more later in the presentation. So on into the discussion of the existing hall. I think everyone probably knows where it is, but just for the sake of putting pictures up on the screen, I prepared this slide. And here we are. It's across the road from the town hall. It's been in this location now for, I would say, almost 70 years, in more or less, well, not the same size certainly, but in a number of iterations along the way. The challenges to this existing hall, we don't need to dwell on them in detail, but we want a fire hall that's going to be standing in the event of an earthquake, and that's the first major failure at this hall. It's not up to seismic standards. It's not what we would consider to be a post-disaster structure. The location is a bit of an issue, and Bob Weir will probably touch on this later in his portion of the presentation, but given its location in the downtown, access is quite limited, right? The firefighters pull the trucks out onto the road to wash them. During special events, sometimes the access is limited and it's quite difficult, or they just simply can't get to it. So that's not the ideal location for a fire hall. You want easy access to it. The power backup for the fire hall is a portable generator. Well, obviously that's not a good long-term solution. Maybe for a house, but not for the main fire hall for a community of our size. And the communication system is also lacking. If the power goes out, we can send smoke signals, but they'll be putting them out. The size. So space needs assessment has clearly indicated that although this fire hall was the right size for a community when it was built in the 70s, it's no longer the right size. The fire trucks have grown in size. We have more volunteers, and it no longer meets the needs of the fire department. So we need a bigger hall, we need more room for the apparatus, and the spaces could be more optimally configured. So Kim will certainly discuss that later in her presentation. Finally, this hall doesn't have any room for training on site. They have room for classroom training, but if they're doing any exercises, that means they're leaving the hall to go train in another location. And when they're not at the hall, that means that they're not immediately accessible to go out on a fire call. So the ideal situation is one where the firefighters can remain on the site and they can hop in their trucks immediately. They're already there, and on training night, when you have 30 or 40 firefighters, you better believe you're going to have a great response in the event of an emergency. So at this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Bob Weir, our Director of Engineering, and his dedications. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about the new site. I don't want to dwell on it. I want to get on to the presentations of the architect and the project manager. But Luke referred a little bit to the access to the old site. And the difficulties with the old site are the benefits to the new site. If you talk about emergency or protective services, it's all about the response time of the firefighters. Now, in the old site, it was probably ideal when the firefighters lived around the fire hall and they just went downtown and turned themselves up from there. But now the community has grown, the firefighters are spread out amongst the community, and to get to the fire hall, they have to go towards the congestion of the town core. And in the new location, they don't have to do that. There's varied and multiple, less congested ways for them to get to the hall and for the equipment to get away from the hall very quickly. So I think we all know where this is. It's right on the southeast corner of the roundabout. It's adjacent to other municipal utilities and the water reservoirs and booster pump station. This site is as central, if not more central, to the fire department's fire protection area. That's an important thing. And the one, I think my favorite aspect of this site is that it has major arterials running in north, south, east, west. They can get away from this hall on very efficient roadways to wherever they need to go. So this is an excellent site. It means that the firefighters are not congesting the downtown, especially during events when it's really tied up. They're not fighting other traffic to get there or get away. So that's what I see as the major benefit. This aerial photo does not have the roundabout on it. However, we have a bit of the outline of the roundabout. And just the traffic calming effect of the roundabout at this location provides like a low-speed point of access for the apron to leave the fire hall site. So this is a good thing. It's very easy for us to control the traffic. The other traffic will be on the roadway, either stacked up here or perhaps on the inside of Berwick, so the fire department can leave and do whatever they need to do. There's good sight distances in all directions and low speeds. As Luke referred to, the size of the site provides ample opportunity to have training on site, and we see this as a huge benefit. The co-occupation of the site with the major water storage reservoir, the booster pump station, gives us an ability to utilize geothermal heating for this building and achieve like long-term efficiencies in the operational costs of this building. This is already a technology that we've piloted and have in place for the booster pump station on site. So the difficult part of geothermal energy is trying to get water out of the ground so you can extract some heat from it. Well, our water department does that all day long. We produce typically in excess of 1 million gallons a day, sometimes several million gallons a day. It's very easy to just divert a little bit of that water through a heat exchanger, and we can use that to heat the building. So that brings us some long-term operating advantages. Timber from the site can also be harvested and milled and used in the various architectural finishes or finishing of the building. We're hoping to see some of that. Now, in looking at the site, some of its advantages can also be seen as disadvantages. This is an undeveloped site, so there are going to be associated site development costs with it. It's a large site. If we want training on site, we're going to have to build it. So it's a negative, but it comes with a positive. There is certainly water servicing to the site. We have our fiber optic cable, and it's extremely easy to get hooked into all of the data networks of the town. However, we don't have sanitary sewer or gas to the site, so there'll be additional costs in extending those services to it. So that's really all the site aspects that I wanted to bring up. And I had just prepared a few notes on Walter Hoogland. I don't know whether the last meeting was appointed or not. But anyway, I'm just going to take a minute to introduce Walter. Walter Hoogland was appointed by council to be the project manager for the new Fire Hall project. Walter is an upstanding and accomplished member of our community. He's resided in Qualicum Beach for 13 years with his wife Marilyn, and he understands the community well. In 2011, he received the Above and Beyond Volunteer Award. In 2009, he was Qualicum Beach's Volunteer of the Year. He is chaired for Fire and Ice and Family Day committees. He served on the Qualicum Beach Advisory Planning Committee and is currently involved in the Kiwanis Affordable Housing Society redevelopment initiative of First Avenue. Walter has 40 years of experience in construction development, claims to be semi-retired as a project manager for both building and civil contracting. He's built commercial buildings, schools, shopping centers, care facilities, and closer to home, he was the project manager for the Qualicum Beach Memorial Golf Course Clubhouse, the RDN offices in Nanaimo, and Family Place, Aerosmith Lodge, and Coakley Manor in Parksville. Council recognized that Walter would ensure that the project be carried out in an efficient manner and that the community would get good value for money. Walter.
Good evening to all. As Luke and Bob mentioned, I was appointed by council, and it was an evening that council was trying to decide a number of things, and I was the only thing that was unanimous that evening, so I was quite pleased. So to move this forward, how do we do it? I can't do it. I need people. I need good people. I need a group of people. So I suggested to a number of council members that we should set up a working group. People from our community, from our staff, people that are going to be using the building, and people that are very professional in the architectural and design world. So staff and I put together terms of reference for this working group, which council agreed to, and then we went forward and started selecting the various members. Of course, it was easy to have Bob and Luke come on board, and what we did was we wanted to make sure that the fire department was well represented, and boy, the volunteers have got a great fire chief and a deputy chief, both Darryl Cozy and Peter Cornell, who represented them so well and for the needs. And they were they brought all of this information every Thursday evening to the group for more input. We also had Corporal Jesse Foreman involved from the emergency services side, which is very important. Kim Johnson, as an advisory consultant, came on board, appointed by council again. And with her came a whole group of people. And I'd like to get, a little later on, I'd like to get Kim to introduce them. So there's an item that I really wanted to have is get that community representation into the group. So we set up the terms of references for this group, and keeping in mind that we wanted community members, and these community members, we needed to ensure that they had some idea about emergency services, bit of construction experience, planning experience, and if a bonus would be somebody from the Advisory Planning Commission. So we looked at these things. They also have to live at Qualicum Beach, be involved in the community in different service groups, perhaps Rotary. So anyways, Greg's husband, he came forward. He was a fellow that had good experience. He came from Calgary originally, was a counselor in Calgary, involved in the boom times of the 70s. Moved over to South Samaran, became a planning director there. He worked there for a number of years, and then came into Qualicum Beach one day, loved it, and bought a house the next day, and then started looking for things to do to help this community. And he was appointed on the Advisory Planning Commission. Well, this man, of course, was going to come on this team with us. We had Jason Davies in our community, young man, young family, a contractor. He understood building systems. He was involved in the community as a president of the Rotary. I saw him painting a fence there on the waterfront. Yes, boy, he's going to represent our community well. Then Sandy came. I met her one night. We were at a meeting and we were talking about emergency services. I had no idea that she was that well informed about emergency services. She was involved, invited on the cultural roundtable, which she's working at all the time, in community events, involved in with residents in the community. And then the bonus was that she understood emergency services. So as far as I'm concerned, the community was very well represented by the choices that we made. What are we going to do with this group? And that was also laid out in the terms of reference. Review the project design, attend the meetings. Review, lead the sustainability and all the alternatives around that. Ensure that the space planning was going to work and meets the needs of the fire department and the community. Review the grant opportunities, and we're chasing that. Create community awareness and engage the community. We're all here, we're hearing about it, and there's a website out there right now as well, and it's got all the information that you would ever want. As a matter of fact, this evening is being videoed, and it will be on the website probably in the next couple of days. So any questions that you're unsure of, just go to the website and you can have a look at it. So community awareness. We're also to report to council. But as a group, the terms of reference that we were given, we felt that wasn't complete enough. We looked at it and we said, we're going to reassess what Bob and Luke and what we were told. So we looked at the whole thing again, and especially from our community members, they looked at the demographics of our community. They challenged the building's abilities and the seismic capabilities of the existing building. They challenged us for the size of the building and everything else. So we were assessing this thing all through, and we were assessing what happened in the past. We were trying to assess what was going to happen in the future. So these were some of the things that we found, and that was part of the purpose of the group. So what have we done to get to this point? We looked at the emergency services, we reviewed them. We met every 2 or 3 weeks, 2, 3, 4, I think even once 5 hours. We questioned and reviewed the demographics and the community growth. We listened and we watched. We sat in a meeting, we heard the bells go off. We heard what they do. We went on field trips. As a matter of fact, a couple of the councilors went to Gabriola Island and had a good look over there and saw what they built in the new building. Oh, by the way, I just got to mention that Mary is also on the working group, so she went off with one of the councilors. She's sitting over there. She should be sitting up here as one of the working group. Now, and so then we also went off to Central Savage. We went with a couple of fire trucks or a couple of pickup trucks and went down Victoria Way, Central Sandwich, had a really good look at what they did. And we were surprised. They had some beautiful building. We came back and challenged the architect. We said, wow, why do they need that? Why do they, you know? We also went to Langford, a building that was up for 10 years. And we talked to the fire chief there. He took us for a tour around their building. And so we asked him the question, what did you guys do that you would like to redo over? What didn't work for you? Well, we got a lot of answers, you know, and again, we took those answers and we took them home with us, and again, challenged the design that we had or the way we're going in terms of our space needs. There's another thing that I did as part of the group and looked at these buildings as well and came up with a cost. And that was one of our terms of reference, that we have a cost, look at the budgets, and see how that all would work in terms of what we're trying to build. And we'll get to that a little later. Where are we going from here? We're going to be continuing to assess, continuing to look at what the design has brought to us. We have learned a lot. We've listened a lot. And we're going to take what we've learned and take it into the future with us. And we're going to refine the project's design, its costs, right through to the working drawing stage. And we're going to seek valuable grant opportunities because we're aware of them. We know that they're there, and what we're building, we are eligible for. Anyways, that's what the working group is all about. And part of that working group is our design group as well. They're actually the advisory group to the working group. So Kim Johnson from Johnson Davidson Architect. I'll get her to introduce all her consultants. And then go right into what we've learned in your presentation.
Hi everyone. I don't know if you remember us from last time, but my name is Kim Johnson. I'm from Johnson Davidson Architects, and I have my colleague here, John Metello, who's managed to escape sitting at the front here with us. But along with us, obviously, as the design develops, and as Walter and Bob and Luke have mentioned, what happens is as we begin to flush that out, we obviously need other consultants that can help make sure that all the divisions of the building come together the way we need to. So I'd just like to take a moment here to introduce everybody from the team. So we have Sean Harold here from Harold Engineering for structural, and beside him, wave Sean. Let's see. Bruce Campbell from Roy Campbell Engineering, who represents electrical. Asif Hussain from Flow Engineering, representing mechanical. And Matt Palmer and Ben Cartmel from Coors Engineering, who represent the civil side of things for the site. So all of us have been working together with the working group, as you've heard, to take the project on to the next stage from the last time that you'd seen us. So what I'll do here is, a lot of this information is on the boards behind you, so we're happy to afterwards, oh, cool. We're happy to spend some time and answer any questions that you have about any of these disciplines and where the project has gone so far. But I won't take over a whole bunch of your time here, but I will start by taking a look at the site plan. Last time that you saw us, we've been looking at various versions, where to put the building, how to access it, how to make sure those emergency vehicles can get out to the road the way they need to be. How do we make sure that there's no conflict between public coming to the building, volunteers coming to the building, and those emergency vehicles leaving? And what you see in front of you is the design development version of that. So we've taken it into this next stage. And I'll just walk you through the site a little bit. What you see in front of you here is we have two exiting and entrance points off onto Rupert Road here. The apron, the front apron, is where emergency vehicles only will exit and sometimes return back into the bays here. So it really is a fire department only kind of access. And what it really needs to do is make sure that we have enough of the grade to get us down to the road very quickly without causing any sort of bumps or obstacles along the way. We need to make sure that we take you straight out perpendicular to Rupert Road so that those emergency vehicles can take off in either direction without endangering public safety or, of course, the safety of the fire department and obviously the vehicles. We want them to get where they need to go really quickly. So one of the keys to all of this is, first of all, of course, is positioning the apparatus bays, which you see right here in these four sort of bays located just adjacent to the reservoir. This represents the existing water reservoir, and so what we were trying to do is make sure that we tuck the building as close to this as we could, because we're actually going to use it to our advantage in the very near future here when I jump into that for training. It's also built to post-disaster standards, and it's very important to remember that that is one of the key issues in the difference between the fire hall that you have now and the fire hall that will be built as a result of this proposal, hopefully. So what that does is it means that the building is actually built to 1.5 times greater a seismic force than your average building. So the building you're standing in here now, some people may say, well, why don't we use this for training? Why don't we use this for various functions that the fire department can use? Well, we want to make sure that when an earthquake happens, that the building is still standing. This one may be, it may not be, but that building will be. And so the idea is that we design it to those higher seismic forces to make sure that people can get out, fire department get out to help all of you, but also that the building itself is standing and still useful. In addition to that main exiting that we have, and sometimes return for emergency vehicles only, we have the access to the site. And the reason we separated these is we wanted to make sure that there was no conflict between volunteers arriving, the parking you can see adjacent to the apparatus base here, so they come quickly in through this door here, and we'll take you through the floor plans in a bit, and also that that's where the public will arrive. So there's no conflict, obviously, with people arriving and exiting through the same entranceway.
Sorry, can you go on the other side?
Sorry. Oh, you're gonna, yeah, not good. Okay, so, and what we wanted to make sure, obviously, is that we were able to keep this wonderful green belt here along the front edge of Rupert Road. So we're, Victoria Drakeford, who I forgot, who also escaped my, the seat up here, who's our landscape architect, will be able to describe in more detail if you have questions. But what we were really focusing on here from a planning perspective is trying to make sure that this green belt was kept intact. So we want to use a lot of the existing landscaping that's there now. But we do want people to come to the site through the secondary entrance and this continuation of Berwick Road, which will eventually take us back to the training yard. So we've got parking towards the front, quick access for volunteers into the bays, parking for the public, which takes you across the bays and directly into the entrance, and then a training yard towards the rear of the hall here. What this really looks at is taking the more industrial side of the fire department and their training and placing it away from where the public accesses and away from where parking is and keeping it towards the rear of the hall. This is also where we've located the hose tower, and the hose tower is traditionally obviously used for hose drying, which it still is, but it's also got a multi-purpose use. So we will design the interior for that to have confined space rescue within the shell of the hose tower, but 3 sides of that hose tower will also be used for training for the fire department, and they'll be able to use it in a variety of ways, and we'll design it with certain obstacles that suit their needs in order to make sure that, as Luke and Bob had mentioned, training on site can be as effective as possible. We also need a certain distance off that hose tower, 20 meters, to make sure that vehicles can be positioned around the hose tower, and again, that training can take place. A little bit more, we have some of the services back here as well. This is a very key portion here, and Bruce will be very excited to talk about this, is the emergency gen set. So unlike the building that you have now, this building will be served by an emergency generator that will run the entire building if power is down and services are down. So we have a gen set here, we'll run that right now for 72 hours without refueling. And then also we have sort of tried to create a nice public entrance towards the northern side here, which gives us access to the road, but also, of course, access to parking here. The distance between that pedestrian walkway and the apparatus bays is 20 meters, which gives the fire department enough time to get out of the bays fully, doors could drop, and not infringe on the pedestrian walkway across the apron. So there's a good distance there for, as you heard about right now, pulling vehicles out of the bays and washing them, doing maintenance on them means these guys are sitting in the middle of the road right now. In this case, they'll be able to sit on this first part of the apron without impacting pedestrian walkway and then head out onto the street and in a safe manner. How do we operate this guy? Okay. So I won't go into this in too much detail, but Victoria Drakeford is here from as our landscape architect. She will be able to take you through the landscape plan in detail. But what we really wanted to show here was that we are focusing on trying to keep the existing forested areas on the site, but also where we have created development, enhancing that area through rain gardens, using drought-tolerant planting, regional planting, and trying to create this as a bit of a demonstration area in those terms as well. We also will be making sure that our entrance to Berwick Road and an entrance to the parking in the fire hall on this side will indeed meet the town guidelines and ensure that it has a nice civic entry as you approach the building. Okay, onto the floor plan. So as everybody before me has said, the floor plan has taken some time to develop, and the reason for that is because it has been really well tested. Each member of the group, or each faction of the group especially, has had different concerns. And that's the great thing about working in a community group, is that you are able to ensure that everybody comes with a different perspective and tests the plan as it comes together. So each one of these spaces has really gone through quite a good rigmarole as the building has begun to take shape. Obviously, as I said before, one of the key elements is making sure that we have apparatus bays that are big enough for the current vehicles and for those projected to come, allows for the fire department and their crews to get around those vehicles really safely. And I don't know if anybody had a tour of the fire hall, existing fire hall, but you can see now that fire engines are tight to the front. There's no room to get around them. Equipment is stored inside the bays. One of the goals here with these bays is to ensure that they can be store different kinds of vehicles in different positions, so vehicles can head out through the rear yard if you need to, out through the front as well, but there's also that room to get around them, to maintain them, that makes sure that access for those vehicles is safe and fast. In addition to that, what you see along the left-hand side here is what we really call the spine, and those are some of the most important operational spaces for a fire department. Right now, if you go to the fire hall, you'll see that the gear storage is actually stored in the bays. What we do here is, in order to keep the decontamination down, we actually have a room directly off the entrance that volunteers will be coming through from the parking area, which takes them right into their gear storage. So we have rip and run, or a dispatch area right here, directly into gear storage. All that room is controlled from a humidity perspective. So they have racks in which the turnout gear sits on. They can dry out while they're in the room. It's expensive equipment, so we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to maintain it. Grab your gear through the second door and out into the bays. And what we really want to do from a structural perspective is, although we do have some columns, we make sure that there's a line right through the center of those bays to get everybody from that gear storage straight through the bays into whichever vehicle they need to go to. In addition to that, one of the key things for the future is making sure that we have enough room for additional gear storage if it's ever needed. And one of the things that we do here is we actually position a storage room directly adjacent to the gear storage, so that in the future that can be expanded very easily. One of the key things that happens is gear then begins to have to go out to the bays, and then you're losing your decontamination, your bays are becoming cluttered, and you lose that advantage of keeping things well organized and clear and clean. In addition to that, two key spaces along this side are the workshop and the SCBA room. SCBA looks after breathing apparatus, gives these guys a small room, but it's called what we would call a clean room. So it gives them the ability to fill cylinders, to maintain their masks, to hang, to wash, to dry them. Nothing elaborate, but enough room to do that and to deal with the equipment that they do have here. And again, like we said, to fill bottles, they have a filling station, and to take care of that aspect of which they don't have currently. The workshop side of it, which is just above, right here, is a smaller room, but it allows for sort of dirty maintenance. So we don't want to mix the two. We want to keep that decontamination separate and make sure that they have a clean room to do what they need to do in. The workshop, just a general workshop, work on the trucks, work on the equipment, all of the things that might take them out of the hall and take their equipment out of the hall now can be done inside the hall. Again, not a big space, but enough room to do what they need to do for years to come. Across the bays, again, what we're looking at, this big red line here, what we've tried to show is our decontamination line. So we're trying to keep all sort of dirty activity, minus the SCBA room over here, in front to the right-hand side of this line. So what this does is it helps keep contaminants from being spread through the rest of the hall. They need some other first stage clean down. They can do that in the hose tower, which has a wash down. And then they have a utility room, which has a gear washer. Take off their gear, put it in the gear washer, and there's two small washrooms here, which are called decon washrooms, directly adjacent to the apparatus bays. There's a shower in there, lockers for a change of t-shirt and shorts, and that means that they've had sort of a second stage of cleaning. Then they can go back into the clean side of the hall, head upstairs, shower down again. Don't go back to your families with contaminants on you. You're not spreading it into your own car. It gives them the ability to walk through those stages and become decontaminated, basically, as they move through the hall. So adjacent to that, we sort of describe some of those spaces. In the hall portion, what we're looking at here is a suite of rooms at the front, a small meeting room, reception, and an entryway, so and a security point there. What this enables the group to do is to shut down the hall and to have other groups have access to that space at the front, so a small meeting room, washroom, and so on, without the fire department having to be present, or even if they're there and they get called out on a call, the rest of the hall is sort of secured off so nobody's wandering through different kinds of equipment or taking the trucks out for a ride or anything like that. So, so that gives them the ability to operate that, and that would be city or town-wide as well. A couple of small offices in here, of course, for full-time staff, some workstations, and then really what we're looking at now is into a training room. And the training room also operates as not only training room for the fire department, but for other uses as well, or other groups, but it also acts as a backup EOC. So it will be outfitted to act as an emergency operations center. And one of the key things about that is that when this is in operation, you have an emergency, RCMP comes, fire department's there, search and rescue, ambulance, any other group that needs to, the emergency services or emergency operations group, they can set up down here with all their desks, their equipment, and so on, and still come upstairs, use the kitchen, have a dining area, have a little bit of a breakout space. If we didn't have these two spaces, there's no way this building could operate in that function, because you can't set up and unset up and then set up and unset up. So what we're trying to do is make sure that these spaces operate not just for the fire department on an ongoing basis, but for secondary uses. Upstairs, nice and tight. We kept the lines really tight, tried to make sure that we follow the structural lines outside to keep construction really economical. We have the day room, kitchen combined with a dining room upstairs, the volunteer area. We have a couple of gender neutral washrooms. All of the washrooms in the hall are gender neutral. People often ask me if I'm trying to promote people showering together. No, that's not what I meant. It means that we just don't have spaces set aside for one and the other. It's just like your house. Everybody can just take over one washroom and go from there. No judgments on that. But the fitness room to one side, which just has a bit of outdoor space here towards the front. And then we just have a few ancillary spaces. A small utility room, a little bit of mechanical, and then circulation. And again, like I said, you can see that hose tower towards the rear, and that would have a couple of stories, and actually it's quite cool when we get into it. We have training opportunities off the front, off the roof, off the side. Nothing elaborate, but it's just in the way you take normal materials and make them into something really useful. So in addition to that, one thing I should say is that above the spine area here, what we've done is we've taken advantage of the height of the vehicles, which you do need in order to get overhead doors, the exhaust systems, lighting. all of the necessary equipment that we need for the vehicles. We've taken advantage of that height and provided a ceiling over these spaces and given access to mezzanine storage. So that's for future, and that's the idea. You want to build in some future space because of course this is designed to be a 50-year building, but we don't want to build in so much that it's excessive for this period. So, and then we started to look at form and function. You can see that we're starting to add windows, flat roofs adjacent to the reservoir, so the two massing meet a range of materials that everybody is still discussing and looking at. Very interested to hear all of your comments on that. But we've got a nice low-story element to the front, which also will be built to provide the option to expand in the future over top of that. Always better to build up than out, more economical in that perspective. And then you can see the second story on the top side. Now, we do have other slides, we have lots of other boards. Everybody here is here to answer questions that you might have about whatever systems you have questions about, from structural right through to civil. So please don't hesitate to grab us. We're here for as long as you need us. Back to Walter.
Thanks. It's supposed to be PowerPoint for the, is there a PowerPoint on the, how we're going to put this thing together?
Well, they're better if they're facing.
Okay, what I did is I looked at a number of fire halls, actually the ones that we looked at. No, there's one with the financing on it that Kim just had, and I just saw it, yeah, that one. This one? Yeah. See, we worked together really well. The working group has really learned how to get along. We also know their challenges. And we'll move to the other side. Thanks, Patricia. Okay, so what we did, what I did, is I saw this building. I saw how it was developing. We looked at all these other buildings. And there were similarities. There are buildings that are very, very similar. And because the other communities have the same needs as we do. The fire departments are different sizes. So they have a little bit larger hall or a smaller hall. So we looked at these different things, and I started breaking all these halls down because I got the information through the construction community and the design community, and I actually got the tenders, the tendered amounts. I started and did a fairly good comparison on these projects. And if I was to look at, for instance, Nanus, a 3-bay fire hall, and just the hall itself, and that would be item number 1. So I looked at Nanus that way, and I said, okay, I don't want to look at the land around it, because the land on all the projects are different. So that building there in the Nanus, what did it come to? It came to $245, 200, small writing. I do need better glasses. It's 245, or 200, somewhere around the $245 a square foot. Just for what's red, okay? Had a look at the Gabriola one. It was $282 a square foot, or $262 a square foot. And then went to the to Central Saanich. Had a good look at that, and they came in with a cost for that area around the $276 a square foot. Now these costs are just the building and the soft costs that are are involved to build that building. That meant it included the architect's deeds, the reports, the geotechnical testing, and all that kind of stuff. So I put that into the building costs because predominantly those soft costs will go there. There are some soft costs that go to the land, and then that's a different thing. So so in the comparison, okay, we came up with a number. It's on the board. I can hardly see it. It is 200 and... Item 1. Yeah, it's item number... So I came up with a number of 240 to 254, somewhere in that area. I based that on my experience. I based it on looking at all these other buildings. So that tells me, hey, first of all, there was a trend, because the buildings I looked at, they were done at different times. One was tendered in 2011, built in 2012-13. Another was tendered in 2012, built in 2012-2013. And they're all completed. So the building costs, we can get pretty close on that. When it comes to that site, it's a real challenge. If you take Parksville, for instance, that site, those costs are going to be very minimal because all the services are there, the land is there, there's a building there already, and they simply had to put on an addition. You looked at Manus, there was a building there already, and they just simply had to take it down, use the same services, made a few adjustments to the parking lot that was there, the grade was there, and the costs were quite low. I would think that, as a matter of fact, if I was to apply those costs in those two buildings, it would be around $27 a square foot for the building, if that's the comparison for the do. Had a look at Gabriola, and those costs were, around the $31 a square foot. But Gabriola, what they did is they had it has a sloped piece of property, and they didn't have to do a whole lot of stuff to it to get what they had to do. And I'm not quite sure about the services there because I'm not sure whether or not that was included in the tender. However, I do know that the breakout cost for the site work from Gabriola was around $31 a square foot, quite low. Now we get to Central Sandwich. Their site was huge. And the community demanded in Central Sandwich to do all this additional work, beautification to a property next door, retaining walls. They really demanded a lot for that particular building. They came in at around $58 if I was to apply square foot cost to it. So you really can't do that. So what did we do? We got Coors Engineering, looked at the site, and didn't look at it just in plan. What you do is you look at it vertically. The biggest challenge to do on this project here is that we have to take 9 feet of soil out of it to start. We had a challenge with getting the services to the site. We had a number of other challenges to make it work. What does it do? It affects the cost per square foot in the building. So Coors Engineering did what they call a Schedule C estimate. So they're comfortable with that estimate. And then we had Bob and myself. Bob is very well familiar with infrastructure and civil works, and my experience in the industry for a number of years. We thought, you know what, where Coors was, we better stay there because let's be sure if we're going to go forward, we have the funds to do the project. So we have the elements, the building construction, we have the on-site work that Coors looked at. And then we have the other 3 buildings that we're looking at. Well, boy, their costs were quite low. We're looking at having to get a road built to our training area to ensure that we can get the vehicles in. We need to get the infrastructure for water, sanitary, through. We really thought we should fix that up a little bit, because if I was a developer coming into town, the first thing that the town would be asking me to do is, well, where's the beautification? What is the neighborly thing you're going to be doing for us? Are you going to have nice trees? Is there going to be an invitation for me to experience your building? So we looked at that, but it's a different cost. Those costs were not included in these other buildings. But let's be clear that it is a cost for the total project. And then we have, this is the bummer, we have to have a contingency. Because we were looking at the job, all these other projects, and also started seeing that there was a little incremental increase in the square foot cost just on the building alone. Every year, it went up a little bit. So when we go to tender, 2-3 years later, I would suggest that we're going to probably be spending a little bit more than Parksville, the News, Central Saanich. So we have this thing called a contingency. So when we go to tender, we might be lucky that there's a sale on. But we also may have to buy it at what the market is. Jason, who's on the working group, he says, oh boy, I'm starting to get a lot of projects. I'm getting some real dandies. I'm going to start one up in January. I got another one starting in 2 weeks, and the industry is starting to get busy. So I'm the guy that said, oh, smokes, I just gave a number, But we are looking at an industry that started to incrementally increase. So be aware that we have to have that covered. So we got $390,000 just for that. So when we're looking at the budgets, it could get a little scary. And in a couple of minutes, John is going to let us know how we're going to manage that. But the capital costs, they're real. We're not building junk. We're building a real good building that our community deserves, and that it is going to cost a few dollars. The other thing that we're going to be looking at over the course of the next little while is we want to get into the ground. And we want to get into the ground soon, because that also tells a story. And the story is, that's where the biggest risk, what are we going to find? We have, maybe a dozen holes in the site telling us a story. But once we clear that land, once we get that 9 feet of dirt out of there, it's going to give us another element of knowledge. And perhaps, at that time, that contingency could be reduced. So as we go through with this project, we're going to have these different things affecting our cost. While all this is going on, the assessing, and we'll probably have it before council, Kim Johnson and her design group are going to continue to design to the working drawings. We're going to do it hastily because we see what's happening out there. We're going to hope that the working drawings are going to be completed in March. We can go to tender and get the sale that we want. And then we can start building in May. the following year, May or June, we could have that building standing there. And it'll stand there for 50 years. And that's what's coming. So John, the bad news or the good news, let us know.
Thank you, Walter, and thank you everyone for attending this evening. Just want to go out of order here. I just have a few slides, so I'll be quick. Just to summarize what Walter stated in terms of the costs in the four areas that he identified on his screen. I summarized them here. He had a range of square footage costs. And when you multiply out the square footage, that's how we got to the 5.8 and 5.6 range. And you can see the breakdown of the cost. Building construction component being in the 4 million range. This is not a budget meeting, although the town is looking at its financial plan on Monday. And if we have time at the end, I'd certainly be happy to go into more details of the budget. But for the purpose of this meeting, it's just here to put in context with the kind of dollars that I'll be talking about on some of the slides. Our total budget, net of reserve transfers, if we bring any money out of reserves, is almost $12 million. The second from the top, protective services, is approximately $2 million. And included in that protective services, $2 million is the fire hall. And the fire hall's just over the fire operating costs are approximately $500,000, and I'll have a slide to show this. And also included in there would be our RCMP costs at about $1 million. So we spend about double on RCMP versus the fire department operations. So in maybe going to a slide in terms of the building, and I'll reference back to our total budget, just to tie the two together. What I did here is on the basis of a 20-year long-term debt at 4%, and there's a little footnote at the bottom that says the current MFA long-term rate is 3.52%. However, based at a 4% interest rate and borrowing 5.8 million, and then another column 5.3 million and 4.8 million. The reason I have those three columns is, as Walter identified earlier this evening, we are optimistic about getting government grants, but we don't have anything at this point, and we really can't get serious about our applications until the project advances on the detailed design. So those are some numbers, and what I did is I just took, based on those debt payments, 20-year debt payments, what percentage of our budget. So going back to the budget, I said it was almost 12 million. So what this shows is the full borrowed amount of 5.8 million. The payment would be approximately 428,000, 3.63% of our operating budget. I also then looked at, well, how does that relate to our property taxes? And based on the full 5.8 million amount, that's 5.27% of the town share of the property taxes. So on the tax notice, there's general municipal taxes. So based on, that's the town share of the taxes. There's only about just under half of the property taxes that are on your tax notice are the towns. The other half we collect for the school, regional district, other levels of government. We just remit to the government. So what I'm saying is, on the tax notice, 5.27% based on 5.8 million would be used for the new fire hall. If we're successful on some grants, depending on the amount, you can see how the percentage goes down. So where do we get those general municipal taxes? And I believe it was Walter, or it may have been Luke, who said earlier that the town in 2010, included in our annual budget bylaw, was a projection of property tax increases. And and included in there was a 1% per year for 5 years capital tax for a fire hall. So the timing changed. Initially, that was planned for a few years from now, but when the new council came in, they advanced it up, and we started that earlier, and we delayed our paving tax for a few years. So this tax has been planned and in the works since 2010, the dollar amount. If we weren't constructing the fire hall, the plan would have been to still tax those monies, and those monies would have went into reserve. So what this does, and by borrowing, is what we're doing is we're going to build it now, and we can get on with having the building and using those tax monies for debt payments. The alternative would have been to raise those taxes and then wait 15 or 20 years until we had saved up enough money and then constructed the fire hall. So this just advances everything by borrowing. I'll go to that one last. So this 428,000, based on the 5.8 million, where that would come out of our budget is in the total is 11,787,000. There's the capital and debt payment right at the bottom, the 2,129,000. That's already included in that amount. So we're not talking about increasing the budget any further. That's included in that capital and debt payment component. In terms of our fire department costs, and even tonight we had some questions regarding how we compare with our immediate neighbor. And I went on the website today and pulled out some costs for the City of Parksville Fire Department. And this is just to operate the fire department, nothing to do with new building costs. They built a new huge addition a couple of years ago, but you can see we're about $300,000 less than Parksville right now with our operating costs. In fairness to Parksville, they're a larger community, a bit larger than we are, and in addition they have one extra area that we don't have. I believe they service the San Periel area. We split the French Creek area with Parksville in terms of the fire department. It's the other thing that some of you may not know. Our fire department doesn't serve just the town of Qualicum Beach. We also serve a portion of the electoral area, and it goes out to approximately Johnston Road, is that what? Drew Road. So there's a split between the Parksville Fire Department and our fire department when you go from our boundaries to Parksville. Certainly, again, in fairness to Parksville, I just want to make sure I disclose all the numbers. They do get more revenue than we get in terms of their cost-sharing agreement with the regional district. The service area is outside their municipal boundaries. But when we take on a new hall and have higher expenses, that is part of the negotiating process, and we will be going to the regional district seeking additional funds for the share of our increased costs associated with the new fire hall. And that wraps up my brief input. And now I think we open it for questions for any of the areas.
So this is the working group's opportunity to do some communication of our what we are all about. Now, in addition to you asking and discussing a little bit with us, we had Tricia. It's a little thing to me. That would be it there. We have an opportunity to find out what we're all about. And there's going to be a lot more information going onto the website. So a dedicated fire hall project page was put on. And you can go to the town hall website, www.qualicumbeach.com, and then there's a little fire truck. You can have a look in there. And this whole evening is also being recorded for that purpose. Project page contains up-to-date information coming out of the working group and council meetings. It includes background information, reference materials, design concepts, as well as the latest press release when public meetings are scheduled. It is the main source for staying informed on the project during its phases. The information is also available at the front counter of Town Hall. And the project updates can be found in a noteworthy newsletter when it's distributed. The public can also continue to write or email or call Town Hall with their questions and feedback throughout the process, which is circulated to Council. The major announcements and project milestones are announced with news releases. Email notices to the town's distribution lists are sent in advance of any public meetings. Further inquiries can be directed to our friend Luke, Mr. Luke Settles, just over there. So he's the point guy for the town. So it's important, if you're interested, it's important to go to that website especially. And now I'm going to give it over to you, and let's just chat about what we're trying to do. And you might have some great ideas, and if you do have great ideas, I understand there's some comment boards or comment sheets around somewhere. I guess it's up there. Well, it's by the fire hydrant. So it's in the front corner there, right beside that big black speaker. So anybody want to come forward and ask a question, and or have we answered all your? This is your mic. Please step up.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. The question can be common in this one. As a resident who's in the regional district area, retired firefighter, and knowing full well that the people that Tim has talked about that got 10, 15, 20 years of service also reside in the regional district area, I was wondering how the contributions from the regional district will help pay for this, pay for the new hall. I think it's a very good project, and I'm curious to know how that's going to help defray some of the costs from the Qualicum Beach taxpayers. And so the follow-up to that is representation from those taxpayers on the working group or having an advisory function in the future.
Is this on? Can you hear me? There's a formula for the fire protection agreements with Parksville and Qualicum Beach. It's with the regional district. In terms of the process from the regional district, their model for participation and input from citizens, you'd have to check with the regional district on that. But there's a formula that looks at the capital costs and operating costs, and in some ways, I think it's a bit of a, not a failed system, but you're rewarded if your costs are higher. So if our costs would have been higher previously, i.e. less efficient or whatever, we would have got more money from it in the regional district. But now with the new hall and there's higher capital costs associated with it, that'll happen automatically. It's just based on a percentage of cost. So you look at the formula and you pay, and I don't know what the percentage is offhand, 15% or 20% or 25% on this model, and it's based on assessments, your assessments in the area versus the assessments that are covered in Qualicum Beach. But if someone wanted more details on that, I'd be happy to provide that if you came in and saw me at the town office. In terms of what we have, further details on the regional district, and you may have to go to their office.
Perhaps I missed this in the presentation, but John, maybe you could tell us when this is complete. I noticed the operational cost of the fire hall for 2013 is $548,000. Can you tell what the increase will be when this hall is complete?
We're still working on those projections in terms of what the operating costs would be associated with a new hall. Right now, it's $550,000. The intention is to try and recruit a a number of additional volunteers. Right now, we're at approximately 30, well, a little bit lower than 30. We'd like to be at closer to 40, and we're short of space in the existing hall, so that's not possible. So once you go from 30 to 40, you have additional gear for the fire department members and costs associated, so that there'll be an increase there. There'll also be an increase in extra maintenance. In the early years, the new hall won't take that much more maintenance, but certainly as it ages, it would take additional maintenance down through the years. But those costs haven't been established, and we'll have to get additional information from the architect. The pictures and drawings that you saw here tonight in the presentation, that's the first time I've seen them as well. So it is still early in the process. If you were to ask me a number right off the bat, I would say 100,000, from 550 to 650 we could end up looking at, and then that would be offset by some additional revenue that we receive from the regional district. But that's an absolute ballpark number, but there will be a cost increase associated with more members and a larger hall. And the more members is necessary to ensure that we can do the job that we want from the fire department, and that is to be able to serve the community. Right now it's short. We haven't been short, but there's been times where it's been close and we've had to draw on our mutual aid agreements. Certainly daytime calls has been an issue, and being able to recruit more members will give us a larger buffer to help have adequate people within the community when they're called.
Good evening. I just had a couple of questions, and I think it may have to do with mechanical and a safety issue for firefighters. One of them is, has any consideration been given to a diesel exhaust extraction system for inside the fire hall?
Yes. Yeah, no, all the vehicles will have, we're still looking at which option, meaning which type of exhaust system, but definitely the apparatus base will have a vehicle extraction system.
Okay, also, you mentioned that you have an emergency backup system, genset, or...
We do, yeah.
Do you also have fuel access with that?
We have fuel access right now simply for the genset itself, but we don't have a fueling station for the vehicles.
That might be an opportune time to think about
absolutely.
that as well. Is there any consideration to underground storage? And that is underneath the building itself, underneath the living space?
We haven't actually gone that route. We sort of focused on keeping ourselves above grade. I think the soil condition is relatively favorable for us having pad footings and strip footings and regular foundation, no piles needed or anything like that. So to be honest, we just didn't go that route because of the cost.
Okay. As far as EOC and that sort of thing, is there any consideration for a helipad in the area, such as on top of the water tank?
Sounds good. That's pretty cool.
Well, in the event of a major disaster,
yeah, absolutely.
you're going to have that access.
I don't know if any. I wouldn't know the answer to that.
Perhaps, Bob, you can, or there's obviously enough room there for a helipad in the future, but I think we're going to maintain the airport site for all our entrances and exits for helicopters.
I also noticed on the drawings that there are two accesses both off Rupert Road.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility of putting a third access off the highway entrance to the interchange? And that could be in the event that something happens in the front, or water tower, or something else goes down. Anyway, just a thought. Thank you.
Bob, you want to comment on that?
We did look at accesses off Memorial. However, they proved slightly impractical, and I think there was also some concern for their confused use by others. I think we looked at all the potential benefits of adding additional entrances and the opportunity to memorial, and we satisfied ourselves that I think that we could do everything we needed with not a lot of confusion off Rupert.
Nothing that a lock gate wouldn't provide in the access, in the event of required emergency access for that access.
It will be considered probably tomorrow by the working group.
Good answer.
Since one of the major justifications for this fire hall is a major seismic event, which I agree with, that we need to do that. There's a likelihood that some of the firefighters who respond to some of these incidents won't have a place to go after the major events. So is there a provision made for overnight or long-term accommodations for the firefighters and the emergency responders?
Yes, again, both the exercise room and there's a storage room or association room upstairs as well, have the ability, have been designed if they need to have their storage upstairs for cots, as well as we have looked at maybe the idea of having some Murphy beds, because it isn't unusual if power goes down throughout the community that an overnight stay because of an emergency might happen, or long-term if there is a major seismic event. So yes, that, and in addition, we do look at the EOC, even if it wasn't up and running sort of as a first responder section, to make sure that we would have enough room to move in cots and so on for that. But the upstairs really has been designed to provide sort of that kind of temporary overnight stay situation if needed.
Good evening, folks. My question comes as a taxpayer and a voter. It's for you, John. David O'Malley is my name. It has to do with the long-term debt associated with this project. Could you put it in perspective for me with other capital projects in, say, the last 10 years or so that have resulted in the need for capital debt, or rather long-term debt on the part of the town?
Yes, the town has no long-term debt. And I've personally been in the business now for almost 32 years, and I've never borrowed long-term. So this is going to be my first crack at it. So we haven't had debt. What we've done here, and I've been here for approximately 18 years, and it's one of the reasons our surpluses aren't as large as many similar-sized communities. And they have debt, and then they have some surpluses. We have used surpluses for projects. So for instance, when we built Laburnum Road was about $5.5 million, almost the cost of the what's proposed here for the fire hall. Albeit we got a couple $1 million in grants on Laburnum Road, but still there's about $3.5 million, and it was paid without long-term debt. When the town built Rupert Road, again we got a grant, but no debt. Berwick Reservoir was a $3 million project, again a grant, no debt. There is no debt, and that's why we're able to take on this debt with, in my opinion, and to manage it in a fiscally responsible way, especially given that the tax increases have been planned since 2010. If council said they didn't want to go into debt, and assuming we kept the additional 1% taxes, we'd have enough money and we could build it in 15, 20 years. You know, that would be an option if we didn't want to go into debt. But certainly public input that we've had has stated, and it goes back to the mid-90s when we were petitioned at council by individual members of actually I see former councillor Marlis Diamond here before she was a councillor, and she was in the town office asking us to get on with a fire hall back in the mid-1990s. So what we've done is we're looking at debt so we can get it built right away, for the benefit of the community, and I don't think that there's been a little bit of emphasis on the emergency operations center, but I don't think there's been enough on that angle. It's not just for a fire hall, the emergency service component is significant. It said on the slide there that it's a backup area. Well, the primary area is the town hall. The town hall is not built to post-disaster standard. So that emergency operations center is a significant component to the department. That last part wasn't part of your question, it just kind of let it, sorry.
Thank you.
I knew it was coming.
Well, thank you for this presentation. It's been very helpful. I have two questions. One, although I do appreciate that it is being built as an emergency operations center, and I do understand the importance of that. I'm just curious, how many actual fires did we have in Qualicum Beach in the last year? Not emergencies, fires.
Actual fires, I mean, we're a multi-purpose agency, but the actual fires are probably in the last couple of years, the last year is probably 2 or 3.
Okay, thank you. And I'm also wondering, how is it if we've had no debt, we have this money already in the budget? I don't get why we have all that money in the budget to pay for debt we don't have.
Just a couple questions on that. First of all, on the debt, there was an aspect of debt that we do have. I should have stated that more clear. The clear way that I should have stated it is no long-term debt. We do have 5-year capital leases that we use for the purpose of buying fire trucks. Several years ago, I don't know how many it is now, 6 or 7 years ago, council increased taxes 1% per year for 2 years to get it to 2% total, which raises approximately $140,000 now. That money is used for the purpose of financing a new fire truck every 5 years. So if there's 4 major fire trucks to fund, that 2% funds that through a lease payment. I think the number that you might have been referring to on the screen is I have capital and debt lumped together is approximately $2.2 million. Most of that was for capital expenditures. In some ways, I look at them as one and the same, because the debt payment is really just paying for capital, but instead of paying it all in one big lump sum, it's spread over, say, 20 years. So it comes from within that $2.2 million.
So just to clarify then, the additional money that we were putting out, which was 100 somewhere, was it 428? That is already miraculously involved in the 2.2 million, though we don't have a debt yet.
That money, we're in year 2 of the plan for the fire tax 1% increase. The budget, going back again to 2010, and 1% per year for 5 years. We're in year 2. So 2014 and 15, 16, 17. As of 2017, it would be the full 5% amount. So it builds up. Right now, it isn't the full amount in there, but we don't have the debt payments right now. We haven't started construction. Partial construction will occur in 2014, and then some in 2015. Full debt payment won't start until 2016, assuming the construction timetable that has been discussed here this evening.
So the amount isn't really included in there yet. It's the 1% and the 2% that you're putting into that. So it's like the savings that we're putting into that?
Well, yes, it would be. It's a 5-year financial plan. So it will go for the years it has the 1%. In the final year, it converts to paving instead of the fire hall. So I'm a bit confused at what your question is on it. So.
Well, it just seems like we're counting the money that we need to save as already paid. And so I think I understand what you're saying now.
Okay.
I think I've got it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question.
My name is Libby Ansel, and I was very blessed this afternoon to go to the fire hall. Oh, you too, yeah? I'm too short.
When we put this together, it's very strong.
Okay. Thank you. I just was very grateful to go to the fire hall, the old fire hall this afternoon, because I learned so much. And one of the major things that I learned was it was nothing to do with the 2 or 3 fires that had happened over the last year or 2 years or 3 years. It's what else the fire hall does. And I wondered if our fire chief could maybe give a little talk on a few of those things that you do besides go to fires. I was impressed.
Yeah, the members, 26 members that we have, they service the community not only in fires. When I say 3 fires, that includes what's happening at Qualicum Beach. It doesn't include the mutual aid call-outs that we have to other neighboring departments to the north, to the west, and to the south. Qualicum Beach has several functions. We fight fires. We deal with low slope rescue. We do have members that train in swiftwater rescue as well as confined space. We have some areas in Qualicum Beach where we have confined spaces such as the bottom end of the pool, underneath the pool. We have manholes in the town where the staff have to enter on occasion and do some work down there. So we act as a rescue system in the event of a major incident and someone has to be rescued. We also provide medical response to the community, and up until last year, I think we did 500 calls of service last year, 449 calls of service, and a good portion of those were medical aid. We since reduced our level of service for the medical aid due to the fact that BC Ambulance has increased their staffing of ambulances and fire and ambulance stations. So it's actually cut up probably about 40 or 50% of our call volume out of our budget. So this year we're sitting around 250 calls. And again, 3 of them are fires for Qualicum Beach. We do gas leaks, auto extrication. It's one of our components that we also do. So we are a multifaceted agency, so we provide a large array of services to the community, and that requires training, lots of training. And these members come out on weekends. Thursday nights is a regular practice for 2 hours. But we also send them away for extra training. They do live fire training up in Comox. We send them away for other rescue courses, technical rescue. We have somebody come in. So they spend weekends training in the station as well, doing ropes and knots, things that we learn over the years. And they're a very dedicated group of men and women. And so they're very valuable for the community, for the services that they provide. And comparable to career departments which provide the same service. So that's what we provide.
That's it?
Also, too, everybody, 16th and 17th is our annual food drive, and everybody's here to donate their canned goods and other food items for the local Salvation Army. Thank you.
I'd like to add that once we finish the question period, there's also a little film. It's about 5-7 minutes long, and then it'll identify what the fire department has done in our community. So if you want to stick around, you can see that as well.
My name is Vern Black. I just have a question with regard to the grants that you're hoping to acquire. Were there any grants provided for the Parksville fire station improvement? Did they get any grants from the government?
I'm not sure on that. I looked at their revenue and expense statement and their budgets today. I didn't see anything when I was in there, but I wasn't specifically looking for that, so I could have missed it, but if you want to contact me at the town office tomorrow, I'll go in and I'll find that out. I did talk to the treasurer in Parksville today as well, and he told me, because I wasn't sure the start date on their firewall, they spent, and this was just the building component alone, over 3.4 million. They budgeted 250,000 this year for a training tower, which is in a different site area of their industrial park, because their main site really isn't sufficient for a fire hall. And also there's plans to close off one of the open bays that's in the fire hall. That, to me, I'm pleased that we're doing a fire hall in a manner that I and the staff and working group would consider doing it right. Thank you.
Maybe Luke could make a comment as well with regards to the grant and the opportunities that we have.
Certainly. So the grant that's available right now is from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It's the Green Municipal Fund, and it's awarded to projects that show leadership in environmental ways. And in particular, our project is targeting energy initiatives. So we're aiming to reduce the energy consumption of this fire hall by 70% compared to the typical fire hall. That's a very ambitious target, and we've been working with the grant administrators to put together an application that will hopefully be awarded. The benefits will be quite good. I think they range from 10% to 20% of the total project cost. So based on the numbers we saw today, we could be receiving between $500 and maybe $1 million towards this project. Some of that money will go towards the energy saving initiatives that we're incorporating into the hall. So the worst case scenario would be that they pay for all these energy initiatives and we save for the entire life of the building. But I think that we're actually going to do quite better than that, and that we're going to walk away with a good chunk of money from the grant application. So things are looking well, and once the detailed energy modeling is done, then we'll have the application into the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Thanks.
Within the last year, we've had a lot of discussion, I think, about DCC development cost charges. And I'm not entirely sure that I have a good understanding of what that's all about. To what degree has there been money set aside and/or development cost charges that are collected in future, particularly from a large, tall building that is being proposed now, going in, which requires this exceptional equipment to be used and supported.
So the question is, do DCCs fund fire halls? No, they don't. Certainly not. And I think it's fair to say that the firefighting apparatus that we have are needed by our community now, and they're not necessarily related to any changing needs as a result of the building that you referenced. So I don't think there's any connection between the two.
Well, in that case, where do DCC charges go to? What do they?
So DCCs go into a number of different areas. There's roads DCCs, there's parks DCCs, water, sewer, and each of those areas has money allocated to specific projects, and it builds up over time as development happens, and then it goes towards capital infrastructure somewhere in the community. So the answer is that depending on the type of DCC, it goes towards a specific type of projects. Parks DCCs go towards purchasing parkland. Roads DCCs goes towards major road capital projects.
So the development costs of pulling in infrastructure into this site is covered by the cost of the site itself. In other words,
I was just conferring with my colleagues, but no, the extension of services to this site is not a DCC project. For something to be eligible to spend DCCs on, it has to be identified specifically in a bylaw. We have a DCC bylaw that itemizes every expense that we can use this money for, and extending services towards the site is not one of those expenses.
Okay, thank you. Just if I could as well on the DCC breakdown that Luke identified. Within the sewer DCC, that DCC is collected on behalf of the regional district and Nanaimo. That's the largest portion of the development cost charges. That portion is collected and turned over to the regional district of Nanaimo. And that's for the treatment plant.
Yeah, I see some piping that is going up to the college inn. And is that covered by the college inn?
That project actually is a DCC project. The cost of that project exceeds their DCC requirements. So they're paying all of their DCCs towards that project, and then they're paying 50% of the additional cost. So they're kind of like DCC plus on that project. But that storm sewer also provides service to that neighborhood, which is deficient in services. So that's why there's a community component.
Okay, thank you.
So this fire hall gets built, what's going to happen with the old fire hall plant?
So we have had some preliminary discussions about what will happen to the old hall. The primary objective, as I understand it, there's been a long-term interest in correcting the intersections that are there. We all know that as First Avenue runs into Harlech, it's quite a neck turner, and it's considered to be quite dangerous. So there's an opportunity, if the hall is removed, to extend Primrose through and realign some of those intersections there, and it would actually free up a fair bit of land. So there's options. We're going to be looking at it. I don't think that's the discussion for tonight, but I think it's fair to say that council hasn't made any decisions as to what will happen with that land, and I will be talking about it in the future if this does go forward. Thank you.
So you don't have any plans to generate any income sales or to assist with the new fire hall process at this point?
At this point, no.
Rightly, there's been a lot of emphasis in this presentation given to sizing units. What thoughts have you given to access and egress to this site in the event of a major seismic event?
I think accesses to the site are as good as any in the community. If you look at it from the typical things that will endanger access to a site, which are typically hydro lines. So there's multiple accesses to it. Perhaps the consideration of a third gated access could also be something that would bring extra versatility to the site. Because I don't know whether that's your concern, but
it is. My thought was in a major seismic event, there's a really good chance that roads will be blocked due to a number of different reasons. Trees, hydro poles, maybe even the road surface itself. Town has heavy equipment. Is there any planning on keeping any up there?
But I think if you look at the existing site, the opportunities to drop lines and trap all your vehicles in the center of your town core is probably much greater if you leave the hall where it is, as opposed to putting on the Rupert Ring Road where there is very few overhead power lines. We would probably have more access like to and from that site than we do if we stay downtown.
Again, you mentioned that this building is built to 1.5 post-disaster construction. Is that correct? As part of your planning, is there any thought been given to utilizing this building as an emergency coordination center? And not just that, but also emergency evacuation center. And if that goes through, then potentially there's funds available from the federal government for that. Just food for thought.
Any comments, Kim?
So far, it's been focused on the EOC side from first response and to get out, but certainly it's something we could look at as to how far that goes and what the infrastructure and if there's additional funding for that, I'm sure it would be an option. I think it's a matter of looking at the whole town plan as to how that system is implemented and where people might go versus first responders versus other groups. So certainly worthwhile in a post-disaster building.
Well, considering that this is probably the toughest building in the community, and I don't know if the community already has an existing emergency evacuation center, but certainly that would be a good one. And I mean, if the vehicles are moved out, you've got a huge Bay Area to deal with.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
There are some other thoughts on that, and I think Sandy, who has been an emergency consultant in various communities, would like to address that for a second.
I would, just to give you some of my background. My career was focused on managing 911 centers throughout BC. My most recent one was in charge of all of northern British Columbia. I was also in attendance and the shift supervisor on at the moment that the major fires hit in the Kamloops area in 2003, plus also the ones in northern BC in about 2007, 2008. Utilizing a public safety building as an emergency operations center is a very risky endeavor. One of the things that is absolutely mandatory with emergency response is that all three of the major response agencies be clear and free to carry out their purposes, uninterrupted. Currently, this community has an emergency evacuation center identified here, actually, in this building. And for the purposes of an evacuation center, which is ultimately a registration component for the getting people to know where they need to go to register to access social services and emergency response mechanisms, this building will suit that. So the fire hall, just the same as a police department or an ambulance center, should not be restricted in the carrying out of their duties, and the buildings need to remain clear. That's the major reason why it cannot or should not actually be used as an evacuation center. Similar concepts are in place, and in some areas the opinions can be different. I'll give you an example. There is a fire hall that is currently under planning, in a planning process in the View Royal area. Now what they have there is they do have an identification of an EOC adjacent to the building, but not necessarily a part of the structure itself. It is removed, but conjoined by a walkway. They have no other EOC opportunities in that community at this particular time. There were discussions in the Greater Victoria region a few years ago, actually, where there was some thought that EOCs in the Greater Victoria area should be actually shared endeavors. That's never come to fruition. In this particular community at this time, the EOC is identified in the municipal office. And this fire hall, during our discussions with the working group, this building, the new fire hall, could be classified as a backup EOC. However, at this time, there isn't, because infrastructure going into that building is a fairly expensive thing and ultimately can be retrofitted very quickly by those, for example, TELUS. They clearly came to the aid of both the Thompson-Nicola Regional District, the Fraser-Fort George Regional District, Central Okanagan Regional District during the times of all of those disasters, i.e. the forest fires that were going on. And the retrofitting of the needs for communication was very quick. So I hope did I answer that question?
I think you were confusing, you kept saying EOC. I'm not referring to it. This already has an EOC located in the building. It's an emergency evacuation center.
That's right.
And if this building stands as an emergency evacuation center, great. But my point was, we're talking 1.5 post-disaster to modern time construction. That was my point.
Yes, and I understood your point. Sorry if I didn't answer it correctly. but having an evacuation center in the fire hall, is that what, that was your thought?
That's correct.
Right. The disadvantage to that is it's very restrictive.
Thank you.
Okay.
We wanted to try to wrap it up around 9 o'clock, so we're going to give an opportunity for maybe one more question, or if it's urgent, 2 questions. Let us know. And if you don't want to stand up in public and ask the question, there is that fire hydrant, and it's for comments, okay? Nothing else. So, Rusty, he doesn't want to go to the hydrant.
I can't just sit down and not make a comment here. And I came here tonight concerned about that we're going to get value for money. And talking with Kim and listening to your presentation, I'm very much satisfied that we would get value for money by proceeding with this project. And I want to thank you and I want to thank your committee for all the work that you've done on behalf of this town. I think it's a great project. I think we need to get it done. Let's go.
Right now, before we start this little presentation that the fire department did, Luke has a comment yet.
Thank you. Just wanted to remind everyone how they can stay involved with the project. We do have a dedicated page on our website that's updated as information is available. So I encourage you all to go check it out straight from the homepage. You click on the big fire engine, and there you go. There's all the project updates as they unfold, and press releases and so on and so forth. And to give everyone an update on where we are and where we are in the approvals process, after tonight's meeting, Council is here and has heard the feedback from the public, some of the questions. It's being recorded. We may receive more written feedback, but next Monday, a council memo will be put forward to them, and if they're satisfied with the direction and all the progress so far, then they'll give staff and the consultant direction to proceed with detailed design. So that phase will last through into the spring, and as Walter identified, we're hoping to start construction in June. So just wanted to let everyone know how they stay involved, and by all means, if you do have questions over the course of this time, contact the town staff or show up at Walter's house. Thank you.
And thank you for those excellent questions, and we're looking for those excellent comments. This group is going to be back at it in a couple of weeks, and we're going to get it right, you know, because we want it to make sense. That's why we have this group. You've heard some of the comments, and as far as I'm concerned, when you want an A team, you're looking at them. And we're looking out for the interests of our community. And let's watch a little film, because I really wanted to see this thing.